Hello everyone, this is week 4 of Aesthetics and Theory of Communication, and the class is starting to wind down, so the projects are drawing to a conclusion. There's still a few things left to wrap up though. As far as announcements for the course, not a whole lot to announce. Everything is pretty much on schedule right now. I have provided feedback on your week 3 projects for your mood board, as well as all of the Photoshop and exploration assignments to date. So take a look at the feedback that I give, make any adjustments, consider some of the comments that I make, and really think about any kind of changes that might be necessary in your mood board as you move into the final part of that project. One thing I wanted to comment on is, and just to make sure this is clear, is that the mood board goes beyond this course. I've really been focusing on developing your project, your Photoshop project for this week, which is an advertisement or a movie poster style design that represents your personal brand, maybe as a visualization of your personal mission statement, but something that reflects you as a media professional. And a lot of the factors that you've developed in your mood board will play into that. So the imagery that you've collected will show some of the visual style you're going for. The typefaces will appear in this design, and the colors will be incorporated in some way. And I'll get more into the specifics of that project in a moment. But this is more than that. So, and this might be clear from the way that I've talked about the typefaces in particular, because if you're doing a visual design like an ad design, there isn't a lot of body text to be included typically. Sometimes there is, but mostly it's pretty limited to a title, a brand name for instance, and a slogan. Maybe there's a little more copy, but usually you don't get real text heavy in this kind of design. And I'm going back to this Burger King ad as an example of this. However, your brand style goes beyond any single piece of media. It incorporates all of it, and you're going to be revisiting this in later courses. So first of all, hang on to your mood boards because you'll be using these again later on. Because you've picked a heading typeface, which is for large text, for titles, for headings on documents and so forth, and you've chosen a body text that may or may not actually appear in this project that you're working on now, but later on when you're doing web design, when you're doing graphic design, when you're doing other courses in publishing and so forth, you will revisit this style and incorporate that into those projects as well. So this is setting the groundwork for stuff that's going to come later on. So point being, what you've essentially done is created your own mini style guide document. And looking at this example, this is an ad design, and you see the use of the colors, the brand colors for Burger King, the typefaces that are standard for all of their media, so even the websites use that typeface, the packaging uses the typeface, and the advertisement uses that typeface. And looking at Burger King as an example, you can see they use a display type for the Burger King logo that's very stylized. It's kind of distorted in that arc shape, and then they have a separate title or heading typeface for the Whopper titles and the other product identification. And then turning to the website, it looks like there might be yet a third typeface that they use for their copy, their body copy. So this is just an example of what we're doing. We're setting a style that's going to appear throughout your branding. So think of this as bigger than the project that you're turning in this week. Some of these factors will play a lesser part in that, but they will play a bigger part down the road. And let me know if you do have any questions about that, if anything isn't clear, and I will try try to get back to you as soon as possible. So now I want to talk about this design draft, and that's the Thursday night project. This is taking the place of your regular Photoshop assignment. So what this design is the culmination of your mood board. Basically, you have been planning this all month through the mood board, and now you're going to take that, use your Photoshop skills that you've been gaining through the practice activities, bring those two factors together, and create a design that comes from all of this planning that you've done. What I'm going to be looking for in this design is essentially a synthesis of all the different things that we've studied this month. So I want it to be a visual story of some kind. I want you to think about having a protagonist in a story problem. Remember that the viewer can be the protagonist, but make sure that there is an actual story. Remember, information alone is not a story. Make it compelling. Use some of those narrative hooks to get us interested. Things like suspense, humor, visual metaphors, and so forth, and really make a connection. Be very clever with this. You can have fun with this. Obviously, if you're going to have humor as a factor, then you can have fun with this. But take the assignment seriously and really make this interesting. Try to incorporate your brand colors. So you pick those colors and you pick those, or you identified those color codes. So now you can use those. There's a number of ways you can use those. You might be able to use them in the imagery. Probably not, but maybe if you use some very stylized images. More than likely, these will be used in your text colors, or if you want to create simple logos. At this point in time, logos are something you'll be working on down the road in graphic design, so I'm not expecting that level of graphic work at this point. But if you want to give it a shot, I'm not going to stop you. But yeah, so the brand colors will more than likely be incorporated into what you add to the imagery, but you might be able to incorporate it into your imagery as well. And use your brand typefaces. I'm looking for you to add some text to these. That's one of the basic requirements. Something along the lines of a title, as well as a slogan or tagline or a catchphrase, something along those lines at a minimum. You can add more, but don't get too text heavy. You don't want to really make your viewers have to read too much. This is something that should be an interplay between the words and the imagery that communicate a message in conjunction with one another. And visual hierarchy will be important as well. So really put some thought into what you want to emphasize. Is there something in the imagery that you want to really be the key focal point? Or is that really just scenery and you want to emphasize your brand name or your slogan? Think about the lesson from the book covers exploration, where the publisher decides, is the author's name what's really going to catch attention, or is the title what's going to be really attention getting, or do I want to include some really compelling imagery that will be the selling point? So something to consider as you're designing. And that will really also connect with the visual story as well, because think about what you need to do in order to really get that story across as well, and which parts need to be emphasized. So these are the aesthetics factors. These are the principles that we've been studying this month. As far as what Photoshop techniques I expect you to use, because in past weeks you've been told, okay, now I want to see you manipulate color, now I want to see you do some photo compositing. This week, all of that is done. You've worked with these techniques, so now I just want you to get a little more freeform with it. Use what you need to use in order to successfully complete the project. What I don't want to see is for you to simply take an image and throw some text on it. That's minimal effort, and that's really not showing anything that you've learned this month. I want to see at least some manipulation of the photo. This can include creatively cropping the image to change the focus. Think about how you can take a high resolution image and crop it so that you're eliminating a lot of the extra stuff and just focusing in on one single duck or what have you. Think about the rule of thirds. We didn't really cover that this month, but putting your focal point into a strategic location so that you have room for all the other elements and so forth. Combining imagery. You learned how to do that last week with photocompositing. You could either do a photo collage or just take a single element like you did with the ducks and put that into an image. This could be something like putting your face over an interesting backdrop, or adding, I don't know how it would be relevant, but adding a product like a package or something into the photo, or adding an element into a new location. If you want to bring the Eiffel Tower into downtown Orlando, then you have the skills to do that. Just coming up with random ideas, but you can alter the color to change the mood or the energy. You think about color theory, the complementary versus analogous colors, or to establish different emotional associations. And while we didn't cover this in any of the practice activities, it is part of the Linda course, and that is how to remove unwanted elements, like taking out a particular building or a person you don't want in the photo or something like that. If you want to get ambitious, you can do that. So these are the possible techniques you can use. You can use any combination of these, whatever you need to do in order to successfully complete the project. I'm not telling you to do any one of these things, but you make that judgment. And yeah, I included this one just as sort of an example. This isn't a student project. This is actually one from We Love Ad that I used to use for analysis assignments back when I used to have analysis assignments in the course. And this is a good example just of a visual story that uses interesting imagery. And you can see there's obviously some narrative taking place. The boy is hiding. He looks fearful. And then we see this very ominous shadowy figure with the kind of threatening tagline, "You cannot hide it." So you can see how there's a little bit. This actually, I would consider this to be text heavy for this kind of advertisement. So this is probably the most text you would want on yours, would be something like this, and I would recommend less than this actually. So you don't want to explain the story to them, you want them to get it from the imagery. But looking at the interplay between the words and the imagery, the two complement one another. They work in conjunction in order to convey the story. Notice how color is used here. They've got the complementary orange versus blue, so it's really building that dynamic contrast, as well as some emotional associations. The young man associated with the blue, so he's got that lowered emotional state. It kind of reflects his fear or apprehension, whereas the warm active color is connected with the invader, the person that's pursuing him. So there's some more symbolic or emotional connections as well. Where you can get images from. And this is important, because for this assignment I don't want to see any copyrighted images used. So don't go to Google search and grab an image. Go to specific sources. Either take your own photos or use your own existing photos. Go to morguefile.com, and that's royalty-free stock photos. I have a few other sources listed. Wikimedia Commons is viable. Sometimes you can find useful images on DeviantArt Creative Commons or Flickr Creative Commons, but be very attentive to the copyright. each of those images will identify the level of copyright that is connected with that image. If it says all rights reserved, you can't use it. If it says Creative Commons attribution, then that means you can use it, but you have to say where you got it from. Sometimes they will say unlimited license, and that means do whatever you want with it. And sometimes they just say non-commercial, and that means you can't make money off of it, which is fine because you're using this for educational. But anyway, on those two sources in particular, be really careful with that. And that is all we have. So I'll be looking really looking forward to seeing how these turn out and how they all shape up. It's been a pleasure working with you. This has been an interesting trial run of some new curriculum, and I think it's worked out fairly well. I can see some adjustments to be made, but overall I'm pretty happy with it, and I think I had a good group to work with. Wish you all the best as you move forward in the program, and again, hang on to these style guides, these mood boards, because they will play a factor later in the program.